G'day so-and-sos and welcome to my sewing room. If we haven't met before, my name's Kathy and in this week's video we are going to be making one of these travel cases. Now I've seen these all over the internet in my shorts and reels, and sometimes they're called a pouch, sometimes a boxy box, sometimes a magic pouch. I'm calling it a travel case because that's what I'm going to be using this size for. So this thing has a double zipper and it opens up into this great big tray, and it is just such a fantastic design. So you can actually make these in any size that you like, and I've done another tutorial which I'll have up in a few days on how to draw up the pattern and use the measurements to make them whatever size you want. So I did this one the other day for my clips in just a tiny little one. So if you want to check out that tutorial and some other great ones, then before we get started, do me a solid, like, subscribe, all that YouTube love, and otherwise I'm ready to go. So let's get cracking. Let's have a look at what we need for today's project. So I've got my acrylic rulers, I've got a good cutting mat, scissors, rotary cutter, snippers, I've got pins and clips. I've got a couple of different marking tools. I'm going to use the chalk to make my initial marks, but then a permanent marker I'm going to use on the back of my interfacing so I can see it really well. Then I've got some zipper tape, some bias tape, and 2 number 5 zipper heads. Let's have a look at the fabric and interfacing I'm using for today. So over here I have my main fabric that I'm using for the outside. It is a cotton duck, and thank you again to B, a lovely lady that gifted me this last week. And then I have a cotton woven that I'm going to be using for my lining fabrics. Then over here I have a medium weight fusible fleece which I'll be putting onto my outer fabric, and then some lightweight fusible interfacing which I'll be using for my lining. Now we'll have a look at the measurements. Let's have a look at our pattern pieces. So if you can cut out a rectangle, then you're sweet. This is pretty easy. So the first piece is going to be for my handle, and it is 11 by 3.5, and I'm using my exterior fabric for that, and I have light interfacing to go with that one. And then I have my side panels. So I have 2 cut out of my exterior fabric, 2 of my lining, and then 4 of my light interfacing, and these guys are 11 by 5.5. And then I have my main pieces. These are 22 by 22. So for the lining, I have some light interfacing to go with that one. And then the exterior is the same, 22 by 22. And I have a medium fusible fleece to go with that one. Then I have my zipper tape, and my zipper tape is, I have to look, 26.5, and I have the 2 zipper heads to go with that. And then I have my bias or binding tape, whatever you want to call it, and I have cut out this one at 25 inches. So I'm going to go and interface all those pieces, and then we'll come back and talk about cutting out the pattern. So that's all my interfacing on. What I'm going to do now is grab my side panels, so those 4 pieces, and have them ready. And I'm going to grab one of my exterior pieces and one of my interior. And I'm going to place them right sides together. So all I can see is the interfacing. And then I'm going to whack some clips on there. Just like that. So on 3 sides. Because what we're going to do is we're only going to sew 3 sides. I'm going to sew both my short sides and one of my long sides and leave the other long side open. So I'll clip the other one just the same, and then we'll take those over to the sewing machine and we will sew them down at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, I'm shortening my stitch length to 3.5, and I'm going to give myself 1/4 inch seam allowance, and remember the back stitch. When I get up to this top corner, I'm going to lift my knee press, pivot to 45 degrees, whack a stitch in there, pivot again, and off I go again. And then same thing at this corner. Stop a little bit beforehand, pivot, give myself one stitch there, and then down here. And that will just make my corners a little bit cleaner and nicer. Back stitch, and remembering to leave the other long side open, and I will do my other piece exactly the same. Okay, so there's those sewn down. What I'm going to do is just snip these top corners, just get rid of some of that bulk where we did those angle stitches, and might just trim off that top bit a little bit as well, because my seam was a little thick. Cool. And we'll turn these out. And then we are going to just give them a little bit of an iron, and then take them back over and top stitch them across the top. Now we're leaving that bottom piece open because we're just going to slide it over the seam on the inside later on, and you'll see what I mean, but it'll just take a lot of that bulk out of our seams and make our work sit a little bit nicer. So I really love doing that angle stitch because it just takes that bulk and that sort of bunchiness, I guess, out of our corners. So I'll just show you. I'll just give that another hit with the iron. It just looks so much nicer. So see how it just takes that bulk out of these corners, but they're still kind of nice and square. So that's a really good trick to use with any sort of project that you're doing. Now I'll iron the other one, and then we'll take these back over to the sewing machine, and we'll just top stitch along that top edge at 1/8 inch. Hard to say with the lisp, but I did it. Okay, I'm top stitching, so I'm going to lengthen my stitch length to around 4.5, and I'm going to line up the side of my foot with the outside of the fabric. Little back stitch, and this is a 1/8 foot, otherwise maybe known as a zipper foot, but if you're looking to buy one, yeah, if you can't find one when you type in zipper foot, I would try for 1/8 foot and see how you go. And I'm sure they make them for domestic machines as well as industrial, but just remember that my machine is a industrial when you're looking at them. So if you find one that looks like mine, just make sure that it's going to fit your particular machine. And along that edge, there we go. Now we're going to look at doing our strap. So I'm going to place it right sides down on my ironing mat, grab my ruler and my chalk, and I'm going to measure up 1 3/4 from the long edge and give myself a chalk mark just like that. Then I'm going to fold in that long side to meet the middle where I did that chalk mark, and iron that down. And then flip it over the other way and do the same thing to the other side. And making sure it's nice and even. There we go. And then, oh, hot. Who would have guessed? And then fold it in half again on that folded side. So now all the folds are caught up in the middle. It's hot. Try turning your iron down a little bit, Catherine Ann. There we go. Okay. Now, this is the folded edge where I've got that bit open. What I'm going to do is now fold it in half the other way so that my open sides are on the outside. See that? And just whack a clip on each end. And then I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to stitch down each of these short ends at around 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, I've got my stitch length on around 3.5, and I'm just going to pop that strap end under there, back stitch really well, and it's just about 1/4 inch or so from the end. Same thing to the other end. And just make sure you've grabbed both sides before you go back over to the table. I'm looking good. Okay, so there's our strap sewn down on the ends. Now, just snip away your corners a little bit, which I've already done, but then my cat decided to enter the shot, so I'm just redoing that. Snip away the corners and just make sure that you're not hitting your stitches. Then with each end, I'm just going to flip it in the other way like that. So then that seam is all caught up inside. So this side, I'm just going to flip it in the other way like that. And then all our raw edges are nicely hidden. So then I'm just going to whack some clips along that edge, and then we're going to take it back to the sewing machine and top stitch along this open edge to close up our strap. And I'm going to put the cat outside. Righto, we're top stitching, so our stitch length is at 4.5, and I'm going to start along that open edge and make sure we get that done nicely. Little back stitch and just cruise around. So there's my strap done, and I'm just going to go around and snip off any loose threads off that and my side panels so they are ready for assembly, and I'm not finding any stray ones hanging off there later on. Okay, I think I'm good. Let's pop those to the side and look at shaping our main panels. Now let's look at shaping our pieces. So I've got my exterior piece, and I'm going to place it in front of me right sides down, grab my nice long ruler, and I'm going to measure in from my left hand side 5.5 inches and give myself a chalk line all the way down. Then do the same thing from the right hand side. So I'm going to measure in 5.5 inches from that side, making sure it's even, and give myself a chalk line there. Cool. Now I'm going to spin it 90 degrees and do the same thing. Measure in 5.5 inches that way. And then same thing from this side. 5.5 inches that way. Making sure it's nice and even. There we go. Now I will change the camera angle so it's easier for you to see what I'm doing next. Okay, so for this bit, I've just got my short ruler and a Sharpie. Now all I'm going to do is line up my ruler with those two corners of the chalk marks that we made and draw a line across that corner like that. And then the same thing over here, like that. Then I'm gonna flip it around the other way and do exactly the same thing on this end. Draw one from there to there, and then from there to there. Pretty easy, right? And then I'm going to mark in this one. So I'm going to find this corner and mark in that one. Same thing on this side. Find this first corner and mark in that one. And then I'm going to find this middle line and draw that one in. And then same thing on this side. Find that middle line and draw that one in. Spin him round. And then same thing. I'm just going to find this line here. And same thing on this side. That one there. And then I have my shape, but I'm going to curve off these corners a little bit. So I've just found a quilting template, but you find anything that's got a rounded edge, or you could just freehand it. So all I'm going to do is find these top bits. So this is our top edge here. So all I'm going to do is just round off that top corner a little bit like that. And then see if I can figure out how to do that the same way. That way, I think. That same side. And just round off that a little bit. So if you wanted to just freehand it, then it's probably just as easy, but I'm going to do that on that end and then this end as well. So you could cut out one side and then flip it and use it as a template to do the other so that you're consistent, but I'm just going to freehand it like this a little bit. Cool. Now we are going to cut around our black outline. So that is just a matter of taking off our corners, curving that ever so slightly. Other side. And then bottom ones or top ones, however you look at life. And round that ever so slightly. And then this one. So pretty easy. For such a cool little shape that we end up with. And then I'm going to cut out this middle rectangle as well. So this shape is actually used to make bags as well, but with slightly different measurements, I guess, different sizing. But yeah, it's just a really cool technique. So if you're interested in making bags, then check out my other cool content over on my channel. And you'll find some other bags that I've done. I've done some pretty easy ones, and then some more complex ones as well. So you can sort of start, if you've never done it before, start with some easy ones and work your way up. But like, subscribe, all that jazz. And yeah, there's some cool stuff on there. Awesome. Now what I'm going to do is just lay that down on top of my lining piece and then trace around it and do exactly the same thing. Now we're going to look at putting the strap on, and I've actually decided to use rivets for mine, but you don't have to do that. I will show you how to sew it on. If you have a rivet press and you've got some rivets handy, then if you want to, follow along. So what I'm going to do is find my center of this top end. So I'm just going to fold it in half and then give myself a little snip there. Grab my ruler and my chalk, and I am going to measure down 2.5 inches from that center snip, and I'm going to give myself a 9-inch line. So that will be 1, 2, 3, 4.5 that way, and 1, 2, 3, 4.5 that way. Then I'm going to grab my strap and I'm going to place that with one long end along my line, and my strap's going to be a little bit longer, and that's what I want. And I'm just going to whack a pin in this end, not too close to the edge because I need room for my rivet. Scrunch it up a little bit so the other end meets the other end, and whack a pin to hold that end in place. Now, if I were to sew this, I would then take this to the sewing machine and I would sew down 3/4 from this end. So I'd give myself a square, a 3/4 inch square, trying to go over those existing stitches, and I would do that on both ends. But I'm actually going to whack a couple of rivets in there. So what I'm going to do is measure up from each end about 1/2 inch and give myself a line. It's just so I'm consistent with where I place my rivets, and give myself a line there. Then I'm going to grab my hole puncher and I'm going to line it up halfway down that line. You can measure that if you want a bit better, but I'm confident that I can eyeball that halfway down that line. Give myself a good punch. Same thing on this side. And there. and then whack some rivets in there. So these are 8mm, I think. I'm going to push the long end through and then pop the short cap end on the back, like that. Ooh, it's going to look fancy. There we go, like that one in there, and then the cap on the back. Pop that one away later. Then grab my actual pressy bit. And of course you don't need two. I just have two set up, two of these cam presses set up, so I don't need to change the dies over when I'm filming. But of course you can just have one and change your dies over from the hole punch to the press. But life is easier with two. Take my pins out and there is my handle. Looking fancy. Now we're going to look at attaching our zipper tape. So I haven't put my zipper heads on yet, and what I'm going to do is fold my tape in half and just give myself a chalk line on there, on the back and front. And then I'm going to pull my tape apart like that. Then I'm going to find my center mark and I am going to lay my zipper tape down so it is right sides together with my fabric. So the main side of my zipper tape, the right side, is lined up with the pretty side of my fabric. Line up those center clips and whack some clips on there and start clipping that around. And this is why we sort of rounded off those curves earlier on our fabric pieces, so that this zipper tape can sort of move around there a little bit easier. Like that. All the way to the end. And then one on the very end. Use as many clips as you need to. If you don't have clips, of course, use some pins. But these clips really are fantastic. They just make life so much easier because they're so easy just to pull off at the sewing machine. Around that little curve. And then we're going to take this over to the sewing machine and we are going to sew this down. Now we're not going to go too close to the teeth yet because we're going to attach the lining, so we'll be going over this again. So we're going to be going round about a little bit more maybe than 1/8 of an inch, so nice and close to the edge. So let's go get that done. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I'm starting right on that end. I don't want to miss any of the fabric underneath. And my stitch length is around a 3 1/2. And I want to be nice and close to that end, to that edge of the zipper tape. I don't want to go too close to the teeth because when we sew the lining on, I don't want to see this row of stitches poking through. So this stitching is just to sort of baste it all in place or hold it all in place is all that means. Coming up to this little curve. I want it to go nicely around that curve. Don't get your fingers in the way though. See what I mean about these clips? They're just so easy. If you put them on the right way. I've usually got them on back to front. And around that curve again, nice and slow, holding that zipper tape where I want it to be. And down to the other end. I want to make sure that I get right down to this end. Go all the way down. There we go. So there's one part of our zipper tape sewn on. Now I'm just going to do exactly the same thing to this end. So there's my zipper tape sewn on. Now I'm going to grab my lining piece and I'm going to find my centers at the top and bottom. So I'm going to fold it in half, just like we did with the other piece, and mark my center up here and do the same thing down this end as well. Line all that up, make sure I'm good, and mark my center. Then I'm going to place these pieces right sides together, so pretty side to pretty side. I'm going to work on one end at a time. So I'm going to find my center snip on my main piece, find my center on my lining, and whack a clip in there. And then I'm going to start clipping that zippered edge all the way down. Just like that. We're going to do this to both of our ends. There we go. Now we're going to take this back over to the sewing machine and we are going to stitch both these clipped edges down. This time we're going to get a little bit closer to the teeth. So depending on how wide your zipper tape is, you'll be at either 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch. But we'll be feeling for this zipper tape over at the machine and trying to stay around 1/8 of an inch upwards from it. Let's go do that bit. So I've got my work lining side up and I've got my stitch length at around a 3, and I'm going to be at around 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm just going to backstitch. Now I'm going to feel where my zipper teeth are with this finger as I go, and try and line up the outside of that foot about 1/8 of an inch away from the zipper teeth as I go, and just do my very best to stay consistent all the way around. So just nice and slow. So there's our lining attached. Now let's turn this out. We'll just turn these pieces out the right way and have a look at this. Now, if you turn it out and you find that you haven't caught your zipper all the way around, then just pause the video, turn it back out the other way and go back and fix it. Cool. Looking good, look at that. Okay, now we are going to give that an iron. Okay, let's give this a good iron, especially down around all these zippered bits because we want it laying nice and flat. Because we are going to take that back over to the sewing machine in a minute and top stitch that down. So the better our prep work is now, the nicer that will look. And it's always a good idea, whatever you're making, whatever you're doing, to iron everything. Like whatever piece you're doing, give it an iron, sew it together, give it an iron. And it is so ironic that I have chosen this hobby. And along this edge, and just give that zipper tape just a little bit of a gentle tug as you go so that it's sitting out nicely. And you make sure that you've caught it everywhere. Get rid of that chalk. Okay. Looking good. Now we've ironed those zippered edges nice and flat. Now what we're going to do is take it back to the machine and we're going to start on one of these corners and we are going to top stitch along our zippered edge at about 1/8 of an inch. And then we're going to continue down and sew all our sides together back up to this end and top stitch around this end at 1/8 of an inch. When we go down this bit and the sides, we're going to widen it to around 1/4 of an inch. So let's go do that bit. So top stitching, so I'm going to lengthen my stitch length to around 4.5 and start up on one of these zippered edges. And up here, I'm around 1/8 of an inch, and I'm just lining up the side of this foot with the side of this fabric. Little back stitch there, and around I go. So up around these top edges, I want to stay at 1/8 of an inch, and then when I get down around the sides, I will widen that a little bit to make sure that I'm catching both sides. So there we are, all sewn down. Now what we're going to do is place it so the lining side is up, and then I'm going to fold in the sides so that my zipper on one end meets up. I'm going to grab one of my zipper heads. Now this bit can be a little bit fussy. Now I prefer to use a zipper jig, but that might be a little bit hard to film, so I'm going to try and do it this way. So I'm going to grab my zipper head and I'm going to go with the rounded end. I'm going to face my zipper so it's right side up, so the pretty side, I guess, of the zipper is facing me, and I'm going to poke in one side of that tape into one side of that rounded edge, and then poke in the other side, and then I'm going to wiggle that up, grab the actual tab and give it a pull like that. So this just comes with practice. So if you're having trouble, just persevere. So fold in the other sides. So it's like that. And same thing, I'm going to get my zipper, and with the rounded end of the zipper and my zipper facing up towards me, I'm going to poke in one side up into that rounded end. Now, if you're having trouble figuring this out, I do have a couple of shorts up showing it where you'll be able to see a bit better. Poke in the other side and try and keep them even. If you have too much of one end up and not enough of the other, then it'll look funny. And poke it up. I think I got lucky on the other one because this one is not as easy. There we go. Now I want to take these both all the way out and make sure that when they join that they look good and I don't have like a big bunch or a big gap there. So if you do it and you have like a big, really obvious gap on one side, where one side's a little bit longer, then pull the offending one off and give it another go. But I think I'm pretty good. So there's my zipper heads on. Now I'm going to open it up, being careful not to pull them down too far because I don't want to pull them off, and turn my pouch inside out. So it's lining side out, like that. Now, what I want to do while it's like this is just give myself a bit of a chalk mark on these corners so I know where the center is. Then I'm going to stick my fingers in there, pull that corner open, line up my zipper tape and the edges of the fabric along that zipper tape, along that chalk mark, and whack some clips on there. Flip it around and do the same thing. Find that chalk mark, find my zipper, line up those edges of the fabric with the other fabric round about, and whack some clips in there. Then I'm going to pull those sides and line them up and clip along that edge. Like that. And it might not match perfectly down into your corner, but that's fine. Just wiggle it around and get those edges to line up as best you can. On this side, shift that around, pull that, and line up those edges. And clip all the way down. And then this side, same thing. Clip that and then line up these edges. And then we're going to take it over to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch this down at about 3/8 of an inch. So we make sure that we're catching both sides, and we are going to sew over the zipper tape when we do this, very carefully and slowly. Cool. Let's go do that bit. Okay, so my stitch length I'm going to shorten to around 3.5, and like I said, a good sort of 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so that I'm on the inside of those previous stitches. I don't want them to be showing on my work, and we can trim this down in a moment. So just being careful as I get up to that zipper tape. Fold, make sure everything underneath is sitting nicely, and then up over that zipper tape. To the other end, pivot my work and come down this end. And then same thing on the other side. So needle down, 3/8 of an inch, back stitch. I'm staying inside of these previous stitches because I don't want them to show. And coming down to that zipper tape, I want to make sure that I'm catching all that side underneath. So coming across that zipper tape, folding that in underneath, and then 3/8 of an inch down this side. Then I'm going to check it before I take it back over to the table, and if I've missed any, I can just go back over it. Okay, I'm just going to trim down those seams a little bit and get rid of that bulky zipper tape bit. Cut across there. Trim this side down a little bit. So we don't want thick seams. And then on this side as well, just trim that seam down. Now just make sure that you caught everything, especially around those corners where the zipper tape is. And if you missed any bit, then just go back and just reinforce it. There we go. Now we're going to attach those little side panels on. Let's get these side panels on. So I've got my box open all the way up so that these side seams are open. And what I'm going to do is place my panel so it is, so I've got the lining side showing there. So I've got my exterior side, and I'm placing that along that edge. So I've got the exterior side to the lining side, and I'm going to clip that on. And try and keep it as even as I can all the way across that edge. Making sure it's across those zipper teeth nice and neat. And then same thing with this side. Make sure that the end that you have top stitched is at the top and your open edge is the one that you are clipping. Clip all the way across, and then we'll take it back over to the sewing machine And I'm going to pull up those zipper heads a little bit so I make sure that I'm not going to hit the zipper head as I'm sewing. We don't want to hit metal with our needle. And I am going to stitch this down at around 1/8 of an inch. Oh, sorry, 3/8. Hard to say with the lisp. 3/8 of an inch. So let's go do this bit. Okay, so my stitch length is around a 3.5, and I want to be a good 3/8 of an inch. Now, I'm not going to pull up that zipper head too far right now because it will distort the shape of my work, and I want this to be fairly straight. But I'm going to be so careful when I get up here to stop. So I'm getting close, so I'm going to stop. Pull that zipper head up a little bit. And I'm going to keep hold of it as well. So my needle is down. There we go. Bugger. I'm going to hold that zipper head down. Sew over those teeth very carefully and then relax. And continue up to the other end and backstitch. Same thing on the other side. So there's our side panels all sewn down. Now we're going to grab our bias tape. Now I've already cut my piece in half, ready to go. And what I'm going to do is grab one of those side seams, and I am going to open up my bias tape like that. So I've got that fold. And I am going to, I'll show you in a moment. I'm going to line up that very edge of my tape with the open with the side of the side seam. Like that. And then I'm just going to clip that all the way along. And then I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine and stitch that down right in that foldy bit, that first fold where we've opened it up. Then once that's stitched down, I'm then going to fold the whole thing over to the other side and then stitch along that edge so it's caught on both sides. So it is a little bit of a not my favorite job, shall we say, but it's going to look much better. And I'm also going to change my thread over to a pink. So I'll do that bit at the sewing machine, fold it over and show you at the sewing machine how we do the other side. So we do it all in one go. So I'm going to clip down the other end and I will see you over there. Okay, so for this bit, my stitch length is around 3.5, and I'm going to start right in that crease, right in that fold, and backstitch a little bit. Now I'm also going to be really wary of where that zipper head is because we do not want to hit that. And I'm going to do my best to just stay in that fold all the way up. Now I can feel I'm getting to that zipper. There we go, all the way down to the ends. Now we're going to fold it over. So I'm going to cut my thread. Now I'm going to get this bias tape and I'm going to fold it up and over like that, and then whack some clips on. So I know that it's secured down on that first side, and take it up and over. And then I'm going to flip the whole thing over and I'm going to sew it from this side so I know for sure that I have caught all of it. So I'm also going to fold in these ends a little bit too, so that we don't have those raw edges showing. And whack some more clips on there. So like I said, we're now going to sew it from this side. So I want to be about 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to lengthen my stitch length to around a 4. And back stitch along that side. And off I go. When I get up to the zipper, I'm going to keep an eye on where that little bugger is too. So you're not going to see this a whole lot, but you still want it to look good. You still, she says as she comes off, you still want to do the best that you can so that your quality of work shows. And this isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. Now I'll do the other end exactly the same. So there's our bias tape on and looking good. Now, last little bit, and if you don't want to, then you don't have to, but it does sort of help the whole thing sort of hold together and look good. So these side panels, I'm going to pull them up like that so the corners are up meeting the top, and I'm going to grab a needle and thread, and you could stitch all the way up. I'm not gonna, because I got a date with a glass of wine. So I am just going to come in through the back of that little side piece so my knot is hidden, and then just whack in a few little stitches, just being careful just to grab the lining and not go all the way through like that. So I'm not the biggest fan of hand sewing, which is why I'm not going to go all the way down. But it really is just to hold it in place when your little boxy, pouchy thing is open, to make it look good. So I'm just going to go down like maybe 1/2 inch or so. Hilarious. So there we go. I hope you really enjoyed making that along with me. Now, like I said, I've also done a tutorial which will be up in a few days on how to actually draft up your own pattern to your own size and wants and needs and whatever. And it's really, really easy. So head on over to my channel, like, subscribe, and find that one as well. And I have got some really cool stuff coming in the new year, some good beginner bags, some nice, easy stuff that I'm going to take you through absolute step by step. So tune in for that during the new year. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. And remember, it's only fabric. We can always buy more. Bye.
Bugger.